Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Ceres, California.
What kind of family do you come from?
When I was growing up, it was a religious family. My father was a preacher and an alcoholic, so a dysfunctional family. But on the outside looking in, you wouldn't know that. So,
People thought you had a nice home.
yes,
Nice.
middle class, average family, you know. People would always tell me, like, wow, you know, you have a really nice dad, and, you know, people don't see what's behind closed doors, you know. So it was pretty hectic. Alcoholic household for a child, that's not a fun place to grow up.
So you're here to talk to us about drug court. So you've gone down a path that some people haven't. What attracted you to drugs? What made you get involved in a risky lifestyle?
Well, I started drugs at 12. So prior to drugs, I was a depressed child, I would say. I was molested as a child. I was raped when I was 12. So I started cutting myself at around 12. And then, so that was like escapism, you know, in another form. So I believe drugs pretty much saved my life because I think I would have committed suicide otherwise. So for me, it was an escape. That's what drugs were. That's what they served as at first, and that's what they served as throughout the years. They stopped working eventually, but that's what I used them for, was an escape.
What's the first time you used drugs? What
I
did you use?
I used crank, and I had a friend who was maybe 15 and I was 12, and she said, I have some crank, and I said, let's do it. And I did it in my family's house and loved it.
Wow.
And just kept doing it.
How often would you do it?
As often as I could. It turned into a daily thing, but I had to start seeking it out. But for a young person, it's actually easier to get drugs than alcohol, I believe. So I started doing it every day, and then that evolved into a lot of different drugs after that.
How long did it take before you were really using drugs regularly, almost every day?
Immediately, that was my intention. Like, it wasn't just, oh, that was fun, maybe I'll do it again. It was, oh, I need that all the time. How do I find it? So it was immediately. I would say within a couple years, it was every day. Other than that, it was like every other day or maybe every 2 days. But that wasn't because I didn't want to do it every day. That was just because I was so young and didn't have enough money that I had to seek it out, you know. But
How much money did you spend on drugs? Where'd you get money?
in my entire drug career, how much money? I tried adding it up one time for a assignment that I got, and it was like over $700,000, and that wasn't even all of the money, but that was all like if I was trying to factor it in, underestimating, it was about that much.
Where does a kid get money like that?
I babysat. I had a newspaper route. I was a resourceful drug addict, I guess you could say. I worked. Whatever I got allowance and whatever I could do to get money, you know. And then eventually it turned to stealing, but that was later.
So you were using drugs pretty much every day. But
Yes.
You have parents and you go to school.
Yes.
Did adults in your life know? Did they try to intervene?
I believe there's no way my parents couldn't have known. I don't think they knew what to do about it. And growing up in an alcoholic household, it's very big on denial. But some adults, like my teachers, I found solace in school and in teachers. But after 7th grade, I went on independent studies. So I didn't have a teacher that saw me every day to see what I was doing. And all the people I associated with were drug addicts as well. So who's going to tell you, I think you have a problem, you know?
And yet you did pretty well academically.
Yes, I got straight A's every year, a B every now and then, every year besides 7th grade. So yeah, honor roll student. Gave the speech at the salutatorian gave the speech at my graduation. And
You were second in your class.
yes,
So you were sharp,
yes,
but you had this other life. Too.
yeah.
When would you say your drug use peaked? You know, how old were you when you were at your worst?
I think when I moved out of my parents' household, it peaked. So that would be 17, and then going into 18, I started quitting more jobs. I started Like it like reversed. At first it was like I have a job to pay for my drugs, and then it became I want to do drugs, and I guess a job is secondary. And then I started seeking out other ways to make money so I wouldn't have to work. So 17, 18, it got really heavy, I would say.
Where were you living?
I moved out of my parents' house. I was renting a room at someone's house, and then I moved in with my girlfriend, and we had a house, and she also did drugs. The people that lived there, they all did drugs. So I lived in Modesto by the police department.
So
Yeah.
pretty much everybody in your world at that point
Yes.
was using.
I
Did
sought out a
any-
world where everyone was using because I didn't want anyone saying you shouldn't do this. So that was purposeful that I did that.
Did you ever have a time when you couldn't find a drug you were looking for?
When I couldn't find that drug, yes, so I found a different one.
But you could always find something.
Yes.
And you could always somehow find some money.
Yes.
Did anybody in your world at that time see a downside?
I had a few friends. My drug use escalated to a lot of different drugs. Once I started using heroin, I had like one or two friends that was like, what are you doing? But did anyone see a downside? I was really depressed, so maybe my girlfriend saw a downside, but she was depressed too and doing drugs, so no one said, I think you should get help at all.
When you're asking the question, if you put the mic on you, that way people can ask what questions you ask.
Okay, sorry. How many times did you get in trouble with the law?
I'm not sure how many times I got arrested, but I would say like at least 7 or 8, at least.
Do you recall the first time?
Yes.
What was that?
I got arrested for buying heroin from an undercover when I was 18.
Boy, 18.
Yeah.
What happened to you then?
What happened to me then, I was in jail for a few days. They didn't press charges, so I got to leave. And then a couple months later, they came to my house, picked me up, arrested me. I got a drug diversion class. They didn't drug test me in that class. I went like 2 or 3 times a week, and I was placed on probation, and that was it.
So
Slap on the wrist.
you could keep your lifestyle and satisfy the court by doing the class.
Yes.
How many times were you offered education instead of some kind of punishment?
I was offered drug court right away. I didn't want to take it right away because it was too strict and they drug tested. But I was offered those opportunities, but I just chose not to take them and said, what's my other alternatives?
What was your final arrest, the one that made you actually go and do drug court?
Well, my final arrest was in another county, but I had charges in this county. So I got arrested January 5th of 2005 in Stockton County, San Joaquin County. And I had charges in Modesto as well, so I did my time over there and came over here. My actual final arrest, I was in jail. I got a possession charge when I was in jail. So I don't know the exact date on that, but sometime in 2005.
So you had been arrested for stealing and then you had a possession charge in jail?
Yes.
What convinced you to finally do drug court?
I was told I would go to prison if I didn't. So it was more a desperation, let me get out of jail. Not out of any wanting to stop what I was doing. It was just, I ran out of choices, you know. I had gotten in trouble enough times where it was either prison or drug court, so I took drug court.
When you started drug court, what did you have to do? What were the rules for someone like yourself in drug court?
The rules were they tested me 3 times a week. They have you go to 12-step meetings, at least 3 a week. There's educational groups that you have to go to. There's process groups. They work pretty closely with probation, so they ensure that you live in a clean and sober environment. More rules than I had ever been exposed to. So.
How long did it take before you started to think that maybe the program made some sense or had your health in mind?
Well, when I was in jail, I was in a program called Woman of Wisdom that is a drug and alcohol program in jail. So near the end of that program is when I started thinking, maybe I can change my life and maybe I want to. So when I finally got out of jail and into drug court, I had a glimmer of belief that things could be different. So that just grew the more that I was in drug court, and the more I met the counselors, and the more I could see that these people genuinely cared. So it didn't take that long.
So when you're released from jail and now you're in this program and you're going to be held accountable, but you're really not in contact with your family and your friends are using drugs, where do you go live?
At first, I did go live with my family for a few months. And then I ended up going to live in a clean and sober house, where it's a clean and sober living environment and you pay rent. And then from there, by then I had friends that were clean and sober, so now I have a roommate who's also clean and sober. But at first it was a little scary. I didn't know anyone that was sober or in recovery. So at first it was just kind of, I isolated and did what drug court told me.
The program, in some ways, to me, sounds like a spiritual journey. Like, I guess you're asked to write your autobiography and examine your feelings and your motivations. What did you learn about yourself doing that program?
I learned that I wasn't a bad person, that I was a sick person. I learned that I had a disease that did not discriminate against being smart or racial background or anything like that. I learned that I could change. I learned that I didn't have to stay that way. I learned that that I could change and that I didn't have to live in that lifestyle forever, and that I could change hating myself. I learned that there was hope for me. I learned that, and those are huge things for someone like me, you know, growing up depressed and growing up thinking there's no other way. I learned that wasn't true. I learned that there was other people like me, and that there was people that understood and people that cared. And that's huge, I think.
Why are you willing to speak so frankly about the sort of the darker side of your life?
Because that's my truth, and that's where I came from. And I remember when I was in jail, and I remember seeing people that came in and that told us their stories. And I remember what an impression it made on me. Like, these people are willing to come here, and these people understand, and this is where these people came from, and they're not living that way anymore. And that was huge for me. So if I in turn could do that for anybody, how selfish of me not to. And if in any way I could pay back any of the gratitude I have for that program, and for the people in the recovery community, I would do anything in my power to do that, because I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity that was provided for me. And I want other people to know that that there is hope, you know, and that it is a disease, and that we don't have to live that way anymore. So.
Do you think there are some people who can use drugs casually and not become addicted?
Yes, I do. I do. And right on for them. I'm just not one of them. But just like people can drink socially, I think that there is people that can use drugs socially. I'm just not one of them.
You used a lot of different drugs. Can you tell us what you experimented with and how easy it was to find it?
Sure. I started out with crank. I did that for a couple of years. I started doing acid. I did PCP. I didn't start smoking weed till I was like 16 or 17. I did shrooms. I eventually escalated towards heroin. That was my drug of choice near the end. Pretty much almost any drug you could imagine I tried. I did a lot of prescription drugs. You name it, I did it pretty much.
A lot of people in the drug court program and in Prop 36 program have meth as their drug of choice. Why do you think it's so widely available here in the Valley, so widely used?
I have no idea. I don't know what it is about this area that has so much meth. It's just there, and it's just in the drug community, it's the most readily available drug, I would say.
Is it always the cheapest?
Probably, yeah.
Do you think it's more dangerous than other drugs?
The chemical damage it does to your brain, possibly. I think you can abuse any drug to the form of messing up your body and your brain. I think it's dangerous. Would I say more dangerous than other ones? I think they all have the potential to be as damaging as you use them.
Do people in recovery think that there are some drugs that are more difficult to kick than others?
Well, speaking as someone that did heroin and kicked heroin, I would say that's hard. But I think every drug has its own withdrawal symptoms. From what I've seen in recovery, it's pretty hard for heroin addicts, and I would say some meth addicts to get sober and stay sober. But I can't say one is harder than the other. Everyone has their own experiences with it, you know?
So I understand you speak at a lot of different groups now. You try to share your story. Where do you talk, and what kind of reaction do you get?
I go to rehabs. I've gone back to the jail ever since I got out of jail with my former counselor from drug court. Like I said, I go to recovery centers and places like that. And the reaction I get when I'm done is people coming up to me and thanking me and saying, like, thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for understanding. Thank you for taking time out of your day. So I've experienced nothing but positive by telling my story to people.
If you're in a group setting with other people who are struggling with addiction, can you sort of look around the room and guess who is really ready to change and who is maybe saying what they think the counselors want to hear?
Not at all. Not at first, because I was someone that no one thought would change. So, I mean, they had bets on how long I would last in the program I was in jail. No one thought I would last past than 2 weeks. So something internally happens along the way that no one can say who's going to get it and who isn't, you know.
Why were people betting against you?
Because I didn't follow rules, because they knew I didn't really want to stop doing drugs, because I thought I was smarter and different than everybody. I was rude, I was manipulative. I didn't think I would make it either, so.
So at some point you had an aha moment and you sort of thought, these people actually want me to succeed. They're not just giving me some rules.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Any idea why?
Why that happened?
Yeah.
At some point, first off, I started reading the literature they supplied me with, and I started reading it for myself and finding that I connected with it and that I understood it. And I thought, if these people have the same problem as me, then possibly the same solution can work for me. And I stopped fighting. I stopped resisting everybody and surrendered, like they say in recovery talk. And that was my moment where I was just like, I'm going to stop fighting. What I've been doing hasn't been working. I'm obviously not smarter than everybody, because look at where I'm at. And I became willing to take suggestion and stop resisting.
So as you started to recover, did good things start happening in your life?
Yes.
What kinds of things?
What kinds of things internally? I started being able to look people in the eye. I started not lying to everyone I had ever met. I started beginning to think I could trust people. I started beginning to think I wouldn't have to hate myself my whole life. Materially, which I always forget to mention because the internal stuff is so huge for me, coming from how I was emotionally. I got a job, I got a bank account, I got a checking account, I got a car. I got things that people, functioning members of society have, but that I never thought I would have. So on every level, my life got better.
You reconcile with family and friends?
I apologize to my family for the wrong that I did them, because I did do wrong as well. Do I talk to my family all the time? No. They're still dysfunctional. My father's still an alcoholic. But did I reconcile? Yes. Friends, I apologize to the people that I did wrong to. I don't hang out with the same people because they're still living that lifestyle and I'm not. But I did right my wrongs. You know, I went to the people that I injured and I said, I'm sorry. So.
What do you have to do to stay sober? What are you going to do for the rest of your life to stay on this right track?
Me personally, I'm not going to speak for the rest of my life. I can talk about today, what I do. What I do today is I remember that I suffer from a disease of chemical dependency. I go to meetings. I'm a member of a 12-step program. I have a sponsor. I work the steps in the 12-step program. First and foremost, I don't use any mind-altering chemicals. I think it's different for everybody, but those are the suggestions that they give you, and those are the suggestions I followed, and that's what works for me. So,
How long has it been since you graduated drug court?
I graduated in October of 2006.
It's a couple of months.
Yes.
And you're on the right track.
Yes.
This may be too far out, but where do you think you'll be 10 years from now?
Well, I intend on going back to school, so by 10 years, teaching at a high school.
Sounds like you'll have a big lesson to teach people.
Yeah.
Yeah.